As a financial planner, I get to see it all. I have clients just starting their careers and clients pulling in high 6 and 7 figure incomes and everything in between. And the scary part is that almost all of them are making the exact same mistake that's holding them back from their biggest goals, regardless of income or tax brackets. It is a silent money trap, and it's set by the very worlds that we live in. It thrives in the background of your life, quietly sabotaging your ability to prepare for the future without you even noticing. But I'm going to show you the number one thing I tell every single client to break free. And it's a change that you can make starting the second this video ends. So let me tell you about a client couple that I worked with recently. We'll call them Mark and Sarah. On paper, they were absolutely killing it. Both were professionals in their late 30s, and their combined income put them in the top percentile of earners. They had the beautiful house, two nice cars, kids in great schools, the whole nine yards, everything you can think of from a status perspective. But they came to me because despite this incredible income, they felt like they were stuck on a treadmill. They were working harder than ever, but their savings were flat. They weren't able to make any meaningful progress on their debt, and their dream of financial freedom felt like it was getting further and further away every single year, despite how successful they looked on paper. And I honestly barely had to dig into the numbers to know what was going on because I see it so often. The amount they thought they spent each month versus what they actually spent were way different. And it usually doesn't happen because of major purchases or even from big unexpected expenses. Most of the time, it happens as death by a thousand cuts. It's the daily coffees, the endless stream of Amazon boxes coming to your porch, the meal delivery kits, the why not subscriptions, and things like those weekend getaways that always cost just a little bit more than you plan for and a little bit more than you think. So they were suffering from a completely normal problem. Their money was escaping out of a thousand digital holes, and they had no clue how to plug them. And it's a story I see over and over, whether a client makes $50,000 a year or $500,000 a year. The numbers change, but the pattern is nearly identical. So, why does this actually happen? Does that story of Mark and Sarah feel a little too familiar? It's because most of us are caught in a three-part trap that is a perfect storm leading to regular overspending. The first part of the trap is what I call the frictionless spending vortex. Technology has made paying for things so easy, it's completely painless. Think about it. Tap and go cards, digital wallets, one click checkouts, those things are everywhere. And every single one of these innovations is designed to remove the pain of paying. When you have to hand over physical cash, your brain registers a real loss in a way that a transaction on a phone just doesn't. You see it leave your hand, you physically feel it. But I know almost no one who regularly uses cash, and I would bet you don't either. When you can just tap your phone, the transaction feels abstract, almost fake. It's just numbers on a screen. I even caught it in myself last night. My son has a birthday party to go to tonight, so we went to pick out birthday presents for the friends, and I didn't even look at the total at checkout. It didn't even register in my brain. 30 bucks went out the door like nothing, and I did it mindlessly. This effect, which some researchers have coined as spendception, basically tricks our brains. It works against our self control and makes impulse buys shoot through the roof because the mental and emotional stop signs that cash creates are just gone. The second part is the scarcity mindset. This is that deep gut level fear that there's never enough. It can be manufactured by companies using marketing tricks like limited time offers, flashing on a screen, or those final sale countdown clocks that make it feel really urgent. But a lot of times, it can also stem from a very real memory of financial struggles from your past. And when your brain flips into scarcity mode, it narrows your focus to immediate short term relief, often at the expense of long term goals. Your brain's panic button, which is in the limbic system, hijacks the logical part of the prefrontal cortex. And this is why when you're stressed about money, the idea of saving $50 feels impossible. But spending that same 50 on a new outfit or going on a Target run just for a few things feels like a necessary escape. And the third, in my opinion, most powerful part of the trap is the digital Joneses effect. We all know the phrase keeping up with the Joneses, but social media has put it on steroids. Your neighbors aren't just the people next door anymore. They're the hundreds, even maybe thousands of people you follow online, all posting a perfectly curated, filtered, and impossibly expensive highlight reel of their lives. You see the vacations, the gadgets, the new cars, and your brain's social comparison engine goes into overdrive. Studies show that a huge majority of consumers, around 70% or more, are swayed by social media when making purchase choices. People feel a deep sense of inadequacy and spend money they don't have to project a status they haven't really achieved. In fact, surveys have found that around 35 to 40% of Americans have admitted, these are the people who have admitted to spending money beyond their means just to impress other people. And the most dangerous part is that we see our friends' assets, the trips, the houses, the cars, but we never see their liabilities. We don't see the credit card bills and the monthly payments funding that lifestyle. And as someone who spends my days looking at the inner workings of people's financial lives, I can promise you the make and model of someone's car or the size of their home are terrible barometers for financial health. But unfortunately, the status symbols our culture looks at to measure success are propped up by bad debt and even worse financial decision making way more than you would think. So combine frictionless spending, a scarcity mindset, and constant social comparison at your fingertips, and you have the perfect storm for poor financial decision making. Now, it would be really easy for me to sit here and say that this is a systematic trap that works silently against you no matter how hard you try, and it's just your brain's fault. Poor you, poor baby you. But that's way too easy of an out. There are absolutely things within your control, within every person's control, to take control of your spending. Live below your means and not just identify these issues, but proactively make better choices. These things are very real parts of our world, but they're also not an excuse to stay in financial unhealth. So, what's the fix? When clients like Mark and Sarah are sitting across the table from me, totally overwhelmed and discouraged, what's the very first thing I tell them to do? Well, it's actually three things. Step one, get off social media. And the irony of where I'm posting this is not lost on me, but you would be shocked the number of households that have a facade of wealth and financial stability who are flat broke. They might live in a beautiful home, driving a luxury car, going on envy inducing family vacations, but so many people are drowning. And I try to explain this all the time, and so many people just do not believe me. But I can promise you that the majority of people out buying BMWs or Mercedes or the tricked out truck or SUV or whatever else and flying their whole family to the beach every summer and buying an even bigger house than the one they're in have absolutely no business doing so. The curated version of people's lives you see on social media almost never tells the whole story. So get off social media. Number two, practice radical tracking. This is a non-negotiable. If you are spending more every single month than you plan for, you have to start tracking every single dollar. I don't care if it's a 99-cent candy bar from a convenience store or a $900 plane ticket. Every single dollar. And the good news is that you don't have to put together some clunky spreadsheet unless you really love Excel. There are a ton of modern budgeting apps, great ones that link to your accounts, help you do the categorizing, and studies show that only about a third of Americans actually keep a detailed budget. And that lack of awareness is where financial goals, frankly, go to die. Your job is to check the app every single day, not once a week, every day. 2 minutes of your time. And this daily check in is all about building awareness. It makes the invisible visible. It makes it to where you can't ignore that the four subscriptions you forgot about are costing you $60 a month, or that your every now and then coffee is actually $150 every month. You can't change what you don't measure. And step three, separate your needs from your wants. This final step is your secret weapon against the scarcity and comparison traps. You may have heard before that the four essential spending categories are food, utilities, shelter, and transportation. But it is very easy to get really murky in these areas on needs versus wants. You need food to survive, which means regular trips to the grocery store to fuel your body with nutritious, healthy food. That's a need. Eating out and door dashing every other meal is a want. Shelter. You need a place to live. But a $6,000 a month mortgage that you can't afford is a want. Utilities. These are the bills essential for keeping your household functioning. The needs are things like an electric bill, insurance, in this day and age, a phone. But upgrading to a new iPhone every single year is a want. Transportation, especially if you live in a car dependent city like I do, you need a car. But so many people tell me, oh, I need a new car. No, you don't. You want a new car. Your current car is 3 years old with 30,000 miles on it, fits all of your needs and runs super well. You don't need a new car. You want a new car. And most people I talk to do have plenty of room in their budget to cover their needs and many of their wants. The key is having enough self-discipline and self-awareness not to let the wants get out of control. And the reason that this sounds like the most basic element of spending and financial planning is because it is. These are foundational realities, and they're how you build a strong financial house. Incredible architects can create beautiful buildings, but they never neglect the foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, then all of the other things that I talk about here, macroeconomics, market activity, geopolitical forces, that's pointless. If you don't get this right, it doesn't matter what policies are in place. It doesn't matter what the stock market does. It doesn't matter if a recession is coming. If you aren't able to live within your means, you will end up in a problematic financial situation. So if you don't have control of your spending, it will be nearly impossible for you to reach your goals. And I see it happen all the time. I've been on the other side of it with people, and it is heartbreaking. For every conversation I have with a Mark and Sarah couple in their 30s who can't seem to get their spending under control, I'm having to have a conversation with a couple in their 60s or 70s who never addressed these very things, so they can't retire. They can't travel to see their grandkids, and many times they have to start considering really hard choices like selling the home they've lived in for decades just to make sure they don't run out of money for basic necessities. But I also have the privilege of working with people in their 60s and 70s, sometimes 50s, who did make the sacrifices, who stayed persistent in saving and living within their means, who've reached a level of financial freedom through nothing other than patience, discipline, and not comparing their situation to anyone else's. So the real mistake that people make here isn't that they spend more every month than they realize. The mistake is that they've disconnected the consequence from the action. We all learned that as kids. Actions have consequences. It's very simple. Financial freedom is a goal for so many people, but so few people are willing to make the necessary choices to gain that financial freedom. You have to save for the future. You just do. There's not a shortcut to it. If you aren't willing to save, the consequence is that you're going to wake up in a few decades scrambling to figure out what life looks like when a steady paycheck stops, whether by choice or by force. Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, and it is, but it takes time. I see so much nonsense all over social media, especially TikTok, of self-made millionaires or stay-at-home millionaires, whatever in the world that means, claiming that they became a millionaire in their 30s by investing in ETFs. I actually did the math on it. So let's give all of these people the benefit of the doubt and say that they started investing the second they turned 18, as soon as they became an adult, and that they've been consistently investing every month since then. In my experience, that is exceedingly rare, but let's give them the benefit of a doubt. And let's say they just turned 30. That's 12 years. That's a good amount of time. Now, let me caveat this by saying this is not financial advice. I'm not telling you to go invest in a specific stock or financial product. That's illegal for me to do, FYI. This is just for informational purposes. I have the spreadsheet pulled up over here. In order for someone starting out at $0 at age 18 to be a multimillionaire, so let's say $2 million, since that's the lowest balance you could possibly have to put multi in front of millionaire. If they put that into a broad-based ETF that tracks the US stock market, the S&P 500, and I used Vanguard's VOO to do this calculation, they would have needed to save over $5,000 a month for 12 years to now have $2 million in investable assets. And if you use the standard recommendation of saving 15% of your income, I'm not giving that recommendation, I'm using it for math. These TikTok 30-year-old multimillionaires would have needed to be pulling in $400,000 a year the moment they turned 18 to make this math work. Why do I point that out? First of all, see my former point about getting off social media and stop using it to compare your financial situation to others. So either these financial influencers are outright lying, and at least some of them have to be, or they are claiming a multi-million-dollar net worth that has to be including things like a home purchase that has appreciated significantly in a high cost of living area, or something like the worth of their business, which people overinflate all the time. Second, my point is not to discourage you from investing. Wealth management is a significant part of my job. My point is that building wealth through saving and regular investing takes time and discipline and patience. Most of the clients I work with in the models we run are going to need a multi-million-dollar nest egg in retirement. And the way to do it is living well enough within your means so that you can regularly, diligently, and reasonably save for retirement, allowing compound interest to work in your favor. But it takes decades. It takes patience. Get rich quick schemes are exactly that. They're schemes. They don't work. Anyone promising you a path to millions of dollars that is supposed to happen seemingly overnight is very likely a scam. The way to reach financial health is controlling your spending and saving regularly over years. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's not quick, it's not a secret, but the reason so few people take the necessary steps towards it is that it's hard. It means saying no to current you in order to care for future you. That's not easy, but that's what it means. And that is why it is such a mistake and such a problem when I see people who cannot get it together with their spending. You are shooting yourself in the foot and setting yourself up for failure in the future if you keep spending to the point that you cannot save. It all comes down to discipline and self-awareness. And I understand there are exceptions to every rule. I understand there are people struggling. I am not trying to dismiss that. I am not trying to ignore that. But I am talking about the people that aren't the exception to the rule. And we all want to be the exception to the rule, don't we? But by and large, most likely, you're probably not. And most likely, the reason that your account balances are low, the reason that you feel like you are always behind is that you are making active decisions while at the same time sticking your head in the sand and not coming to grips with the reality of math and time and the sacrifice it takes to get to a place where you can go into retirement or change careers or start a business or fill in the blank, and you are not going to be stuck in a place of deep financial unhealth and crazy amounts of debt and stress that keeps you up at night. And it all comes down to your spending. So let's take this into the biblical frame, because we all know that our money habits are never just financial. They reveal what we believe about God, what we believe about ourselves, and what we believe about the future. And I've already said this many times, but I will restate it. Living within your means and spending less than you make in the life of a believer, of a follower of Jesus, is a practical outworking of our trust in God's sovereignty over our lives. But the one thing I might add to that part as part of this conversation is that trusting God should never be confused with passivity. I see a lot of times where people will use spiritual language to excuse financial irresponsibility. They'll say things like, oh, well, God will provide. Yes, and amen. He does provide. But trusting his provision does not justify neglecting your responsibility. And throughout scripture, God's provision is often worked out through the ordinary means by which he designed us to interact with the world, namely things like diligent labor, wise planning, discipline, stewardship, and patience. Trusting God doesn't mean refusing to budget. It doesn't mean ignoring debt. Trusting God doesn't mean overspending and hoping it all works out because God provides. Trusting God does not mean avoiding hard choices or using his sovereignty as an excuse to make poor choices. It's a both and. We trust God's sovereignty in our lives and we walk in obedience in the calling of stewarding what he has given us with care and intentionality. And the other area that I've seen come up around this topic is if the point of controlling our spending is so that we can save for the future, is that even biblical? Should Christians save for retirement? I've gotten that question. Or should we only focus on the here and now? And even in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he tells us not to be anxious about tomorrow, right? Matthew 6, sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Don't worry about what you'll eat or what you'll wear. Consider the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. Does that mean that we are lacking trust in God's goodness by saving money and investing for the future? In my opinion, looking at the systematic theological view of how Scripture talks about stewardship and how it talks about money, I think it is not only okay, but it is right and good and wise for most people who love and follow Jesus to be saving for the future. And here's why. For most people, saving for the future is not faithlessness, it is a form of wise stewardship. The reality is that we are all going to get older. Our bodies will start to fail us. Our ability to work, whether because of physical limitations, unexpected health challenges, for some people, it's just plain ageism. There's going to come a time where it will not be feasible for most of us to earn a steady paycheck. And along with that reality, some of the most faithful, joyful, servant hearted believers I have ever had the privilege and joy of interacting with throughout my life have been retirees. But specifically, retirees who, because of their faithfulness, their generosity, their wise stewardship, and their preparation for the retirement years they knew were coming, are able to be a unique and wonderful blessing to the people around them. Most people, when we think about retirement, most people immediately focus on what they're going to do with their time and how they want to enjoy life outside of their career. And those are fine things. There's nothing wrong with that. But the faithful retired believer knows that this life is momentary, and they are willing to joyfully serve the church, care for others, and give generously of their time for the flourishing of the kingdom. And while it is absolutely true that what I just described is the call of every believer in every phase of life, no matter your individual circumstances, to constantly be in pursuit of eternal outcomes for God's glory and for our good, there is still just a joy and an excitement in the uniqueness that the season of retirement can bring in how people are able to love God, love fellow saints, love our cities, and love our nations in a way that typically just isn't feasible during our working years. So when it comes to a biblical mindset around money, that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean preparing in wisdom so you're not a burden to others when preventable hardship comes. It can mean caring for your family. It can mean creating flexibility to be generous. It can mean entering old age with dignity rather than desperation. It can be participating in eternal, kingdom-focused work that you never had the flexibility for in the past. That said, at the end of the day, the heart is what always matters. You can save money and trust God. You can also save money and worship security. You can have millions in the bank and be fearful, and you can have modest means and be deeply content. The issue is never just the balance sheet. It's never just the numbers. It is what your heart believes about what that money is meant to do. It cannot save you. It cannot secure you. It cannot satisfy you. Money is a useful tool, and wise stewardship of what you've been given is paramount to your long-term financial and spiritual health. But it is a terrible God. So save wisely, spend diligently, and trust wholly in your Creator, not in what He created. I'll see you next time.